Welcome to SEC Football Live, of course, brought to you by ML Rose, 6 great locations in Middle Tennessee. If you are a huge college football fan and you are visiting Nashville, check out our great and amazing local sponsors, ML Rose, craft beer and burgers. And Sam, apparently, according to my wife, the best ranch dip in the city. So there you go. That's quite a claim. But you know what? I'm not one to argue. I'd like to stay married. Sam, how are you, sir? Good to talk to you.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sam Conn, of course, from The Athletic. Make sure you check out all their portal coverage right now, which is insane that's what's happening in the middle of 12 teams trying to compete for a national championship. I'll start right there. You wrote about Belichick and the job that he's got to do getting his staff put together. We're going to talk Texas and Arizona State and the bracket and all that stuff today, but it is a crazy time. December as a calendar is largely broken. You've taken the NFL draft, NFL free agency, the coaching carousel, silly season, the playoff. You put it all into the same 3-week period of time. What is covering it like?
Yeah, it's pretty busy. It's funny because in the past, covering college football, you did this 3.5-month sprint, 4-month sprint from the start of training camp in August to the end of the regular season in November, or really started December when you got to the conference championship games. Then it felt like you could breathe for a second. Yes, you had the coaching carousel. Yes, you had NFL draft declarations, but there was a few weeks in between those conference title games and the bowl games. Now, we've seen that creep up a little bit more with the bowl games starting earlier, but now with the playoffs starting on the weekend of this weekend, December 21st, December 20th to 21st, that shortens it a little bit, but now you add signing day into December 4th, the first Wednesday of December. And now you add on top of that the transfer portal window, the winter window opening on December 9th. So last week, which would have been in the past, would have been a chance to kind of take a breather for us as reporters and for coaches, not necessarily take a breather, but for their teams to take a breather and for coaches to get out and recruit and go do in-home visits with high school athletes. Now it is manage your roster, set up your team for next year, because most of the activity in the portal is going to happen in the winter. There is going to be some in the spring, as we know, and when the spring window opens up in April after spring football is over. But the majority of what you're doing from a roster standpoint, you've already got your high school guys signed. Now you got to get all your college free agents signed up, and you got to get them visited. I've talked to directors of player personnel around the country who are hosting official visits almost every day. I talked to one who said they've got a steakhouse booked for every single night until the dead period, because they've got to be able to host visitors and they need to be able to reserve that room in that steakhouse at a moment's notice. So why not just book it for the whole time? Because we're going to use it, because we're going to be hosting kids.
Sam, we found the one thing that this condensed calendar being completely, we found the one thing it's good for: local businesses.
Yes.
So
Lots of dinners. All those dinners that you were doing with the high school kids, now we're doing them with the college kids and transfers.
Well, so along those lines, I'm thinking about these coaching staffs that have a lot of time to prepare. We know, Nick Saban famously, right, would do crazy stuff and his team would come out and be very different in a championship setting. Kirby Smart he's dealing with the Carson Beck injury. You've got Texas and Sarkisian, and you've got all Clemson and Dabo's been in this situation before. A lot of these guys know how to handle this, but it is different. And so I'm curious, from your conversations, do you get a sense of how much delegation is happening for a guy like Sarkisian, who we know is deeply entrenched in the schematic game planning, versus maybe a guy like, Kirby's doing that as well. I'm trying to think, like James Franklin might not be deep into the schematic X's and O's, much to Penn State fans' surprise, but a great recruiter. Who benefits from the calendar being the way it is? Who benefits from the time off the most? Who benefits from having to, who's best at managing all the chaos, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think whoever's got the most well-delegated staff, and I think of programs that are organized with CEOs at the top. I think there are some guys, you mentioned Steve Sarkisian. I think he has found a really impressive way to thread the needle on both being a CEO and still being a play caller. He's mastered those things really well. But I that's a testament to, hey, he's had the same offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinators for 4 years now. That helps. He's had mostly the same personnel staff and recruiting staff for 4 years now. Yeah. That helps. He's had the same strength staff for 4 years now. So when you have that type of stability on a coaching staff, and you know that you can trust everybody to do their jobs, then you don't have to have your hand in everything. You can oversee things and you can make some decisions. Certainly, you're going to be in on, as we're talking about the portal, you're going to be in on those visits, or you're going to be in on the player exit meetings for guys who may be going into the portal from your team and managing that part. But I think there, as long as you are willing to delegate and balance and play to your strengths, if you're a recruiter, lean into that. If you're a game planner, if you're a hands-on X's and O's guys, lean into that. Because I will say, without the large break, and I was talking with Sarkisian about this yesterday, without the large break before playing a bowl game on, for instance, New Year's Day, you kind of have to more stick to what you are. There's not a ton of time to sit here and cook up a bunch of different stuff and look like a completely different team, because you don't have a month break between your conference championship. You have 2 weeks. It's basically a bye week. You get an off week and then your game week, and that's it. So I think that's going to make teams look a lot more like they have throughout the season. That's what's going to, I think, make this a little bit fascinating as we enter the first round.
Well, I'm trying to do it in my head now, but isn't Texas? I'm trying to think. Clemson and Texas might be the only two that are playing on 2 weeks. Everybody else is playing on 3 weeks, whether you didn't play in a championship game or you got the bye, and so that is going to be interesting. And so let's stay with Texas here. I do think Heupel, by the way, will be pretty good at that. Very good CEO, very good at delegating, trusts his staff, but also deep in the weeds on calling the plays, and he's going to need to be against an Ohio State defense. It's very good. I'm curious about Texas, like inside the dynamics inside the state of Texas, though, because we had this A&M thing for years where they left, and the egos between the two schools sort of led to the break. And, they gained so much ground on Texas from a recruiting and brand standpoint with the SEC patch on their shoulder pad that Texas feels like they took all of that work and eliminated it in like one fall. And they did it with a win on the road with like old school Texas. And I don't mean like University of Texas. I mean like old school state of Texas football. We're going to punch you in the face for 60 minutes and you can't do anything about it. And then to play in the SEC championship game, I know they came up short. And now to have what is clearly the easiest path on paper to the semifinals, what are the dynamics between A&M, Oklahoma, Texas in the state right now as it pertains to like what Texas has done in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I think Texas kind of started building that momentum last year, getting to the playoff and winning the Big 12, doing things that they hadn't done last year to kind of build that momentum to get there. Meanwhile, Texas A&M was scuffling because they were in the final year of the Jimbo Fisher era. They were squandering all the talent that they had recruited onto that roster because of how poorly managed that program was under him. And so that it's not just this year. I think it's the last 3 years, because Texas and Steve Sarkisian were slowly getting better. They went from 5-7 to 8-5, 12-2. Meanwhile, Texas A&M went from almost making the playoff in 2020 at 9-1 to 8-4, 5-7, and then I think 7-6 last year, and ended up firing their coach. So those two, when we talk about the balance of power in this state, which has always been a really delicate thing, those two paths crossed like that, and it couldn't be a worse nightmare for Texas A&M when it comes to battling with Texas for recruits and the perception battle in this state, because like you said, you had a 12-year head start on Texas. And then even with that, even though you squandered that, you had a chance on November 30th to punch a ticket to the SEC title game at home. They're in your building. They had beat you in your building back in 2011, 13 years before. You had a chance to erase all that. And then Texas came in, like you said, and punched them in the mouth. And they're kind of like the bully back on the block now. And A&M's got to respond to that. And no discredit to Mike Elko and that staff. I thought they did a pretty good job this year, considering what they inherited from the previous staff. But they've got work to do, because there was clearly a better team on the field, and it wasn't the one in the maroon and white.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Again, I know you don't know a ton about my background, but I lived in Dallas for 3 years and went to middle school in Austin, played at Westlake High School for a year. The dynamics are very entrenched and very rich, and it's fun. It's just absolutely fun that it's back. But I do find it fascinating that, again, the 12 years of bragging about this all erased in a matter of, and I agree, it really goes back to the board of trustees at the University of Texas making Chris Del Conte fire Tom Herman, but that's a story for another day. Is it okay? I don't want to be reductive about this game because I do think Clemson is going to be far more up to the challenge than people realize. I know the point spread's gotten bigger according to Vegas, but this is I'm big on like understanding the situation and knowing how to handle it. Clemson as a university knows how to handle this situation. Dabo's been there before. I do think Texas is the far better football team, but is it fair to say as long as Quin Ewers doesn't have that like quarter of football where he just feels like he's just not getting it, and they take the deep shots, which he is brilliant at. Is that as simple as it gets in analyzing the football game? Just Quin Ewers, no big mistakes, Texas wins.
I don't know if it's that simple because I don't think it's just on Quin. I think when I look back at the SEC title game, it's really offensive skill as a whole. It's you've got to get the running game going. It's you cannot have receivers dropping passes left and right like they did against Georgia.
Yeah.
Quin's occasional valleys, yes, they need to be very minimal. They need to be avoided because we remember in the college football playoff semifinals last year against Washington, second, third quarter, a little bit much to be left to be desired from Quin, and that performance, not the most accurate, didn't look clean. But then when they needed to get back in the game in the fourth, all of a sudden he starts to look like the guy that they recruited and they signed a few years ago. So yes, a Michigan like or a Alabama in 2023 like performance from Quin Ewers makes this academic. That makes this Texas probably runs away with it. And I say that because also Texas probably has statistically the best defense in this group. They allow 1 point per drive, fewest in the country. That has been really the part of this team that has carried it has been the defense. And so that I everything from what we've seen this year, I think the defense is going to do its part. It's a question of can you get those explosives? Can you avoid the big mistakes? Like you said, I think Quin is part of it, but I think everybody else around him is part of it too. I think it's Matthew Golden. It's Isaiah Bond. Is Isaiah Bond healthy on Saturday? I think that's a question mark. How healthy is Kelvin Banks, the left tackle?
Yeah.
A lot of those question marks. But going back to that, big mistakes. And to me, the big focal point is red zone. They have struggled in the red zone in the last few weeks. They have not been able to punch it. They've been able to move the ball pretty cleanly between the 20s, but they've got to punch it in when they get in the high red.
No, I agree with that. Again, speaking of Westlake, Cade Klubnik is going to come back to Austin as Clemson starting quarterback. Long journey for Clemson, big-time recruit. Took him a long time to sort of get going. I'm curious about Texas's defense. It's clearly statistically an elite group, one of the best, if not the best in the country. Last year, they had some, I don't want to say deficiencies in the secondary. They were elite on the defensive line. They lost, I'm here in Nashville covering the Titans. I saw Tavondre Sweat stiff arm a 300-pound man like he was a child this weekend. It's the most exciting thing I've seen in a Titans game all year, by the way. So they lost a ton, and the secondary wasn't all that great last year relative to sort of national championship standards. Who gets the credit for the job? Who gets the credit for this defense being as good as it is right now?
Well, a few guys. I think you look at the staff. You look at Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon. Joseph, secondary pass game coordinator on defense. Blake Gideon, safeties coach, who also played at Texas. Done a really good job developing these guys. Because you look at a guy like Michael Taft, the safety, who I believe was an AP All-American.
Walk-on, yeah.
That's a former walk-on. Yeah. And a guy who was a special teams player when he came on, more of a role player, rotational player, became a starter last year toward the end of the year. And then this year has become really a leader, a playmaker, a guy who sticks his nose in there and pops the football out. You got to give the personnel staff a little credit. They went and got Andrew Makuba from Clemson, the transfer, to help shore up the safety on the back end. Jahdae Barron, who, of course, we know the Thorpe Award, one of the best all-around defensive players in the country, in my mind, getting his nose to the football at all times, but the versatility to play corner, the versatility to play safety, the versatility to play nickel, all those things, and the talent development overall from a staff standpoint, I think has been really good. So a lot of credit to go around. It is a lot better, and you are right. They did struggle last year. I remember watching them when they barely beat Houston in Houston last year, and Donovan Smith tore them to pieces on the back end. And they had guys that could not cover, that were struggling, guys running wide open across the middle of the field. And that has been nary an issue this year, that they've really taken a step up in the back end.
Oh, God, Blake Gideon interception against Crabtree, right? That's correct.
That it was right before the Crabtree play. Yeah, the ball had popped up and he It went right through his hands. Almost had it. If he catches it, it's over. I know he and I have talked about that. That's a painful memory for him.
The weirdest things stick in our mind as college football fans.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such weird things. Thinking about Makuba, like the physicality of that game against Georgia, was that another tier? Like, was that a different tier? Like, it felt like a national championship game from a physicality standpoint. Do you think Clemson or Arizona State has that ability to sort of match that physicality? That's a different level from Texas. They've been good all year, but that felt like a different level. Am I crazy?
Yeah, no, it was, because I mean, you're talking two high-level teams with high-level defensive players and really got high-level guys in the trenches on both sides. I was really impressed with both sides of that, but Texas really has become a little bit like the defense we used to see in the mid-2000s, in the heyday of the Mac Brown era, when they were winning national championship, contending for national championships. They were a top 10 team, and they had some stingy, physical, fast defenses. And now they've finally gotten back to that. After getting pushed around for a little bit in the post-Mac Brown era, they've really gotten back to that kind of edge. Can Clemson match it? Absolutely. I think they can, just because Dabo Swinney and that staff recruit really, really well, and I think they're one of the better programs at developing guys and being able to get the most out of guys they got. Otherwise, they would not be here, because, as we know, they don't use the portal very much. They did finally get a guy on Monday night, so stop the presses. Clemson took a transfer, an FCS wide receiver, but their program is all built on development, and they have recruited at a high level, even though the rankings haven't always been super high. They get a lot out of their guys, and they are able to identify really quality talent. So I don't think Clemson's going to have an issue matching the physicality and the speed. The Arizona State, a little bit different, because the roster is not quite to the level that Texas is. But I will say this, from an offensive standpoint, you'd be hard pressed to find a more physical runner than Cam Scatterboo.
Yeah,
that guy
doesn't even like knee pads. Yeah, doesn't even care.
Yeah, like I would hate to tackle him. You know, you ever see those? What are those things in the little spike balls? It'd be like trying to tackle a spike ball. Like, no way.
He's just all legs coming at you the whole time. No. What's funny is I am as we've already discussed, I do think Clemson is not getting as much credit as it deserves in this matchup for experience and talent standpoint. But that being said, there's something about the Arizona State matchup that is interesting to me, because with a team that has sort of made its living this year on big play turnovers, if you give them an opportunity, they will step on you and finish the job. Quin Ewers, of course, as we just talked about, has had those moments where he just sort of gives the ball away a couple of times in a game or in a big spot. And I'm curious, like, would you be more concerned about Arizona State, more concerned about Clemson? I know that's a weird question to ask, because Clemson's the first-round team, but I think Arizona State's also getting disrespected a little bit in this conversation as well. Having to play 16-12 in the rankings is a gift, of course, based on ridiculous seeding rules for Texas. But I don't know. Like, I think Arizona State could be the chaos wild card factor here in this particular matchup for Texas, and if they get back Clemson.
I would say overall, if I'm Texas, I'm still more concerned about Clemson for the reasons you stated earlier. Is they've been here before. Maybe not necessarily this group, but this staff, this head coach. They know how to handle these situations. Even though it's a 12-team playoff, they know what it's like to go play for a championship. And, oh, by the way, they've played a team of Texas's caliber, because they played Georgia at the start of the year. I know it was a long time ago, but at least they know what it looks like playing against that caliber of competition. And I think the talent level of the roster is going to look a lot more similar. That said, where I would get concerned about Arizona State is they got nothing to lose, man. They are playing with house money. They weren't even supposed to be here. Yep. They weren't even supposed to be in a bowl game. They were supposed to finish in the cellar of the Big 12, according to all the smart experts like me. I didn't vote in the Big 12 preseason poll, by the way, so I shouldn't bear any responsibility for this.
I think we had them at 12 at our.
But I would not have had them. Yeah, I would not have had them any higher than 13th or 14th. Yeah. Like they when you look at where they were last year and what Kenny Dillingham inherited, then I totally would have been impressed if they went 6-6 or 7-5. And for them to have won a Big 12 championship, be here, they've got guys who do not care, because they know where they've got nothing to lose. Nobody is going to expect them to win. And there's an interesting connection here, because there is, anybody's following social media knows this Texas to Tempe connection that Arizona State has recruited the state of Texas, also gotten transfers from over there. So there's some connections from the roster. There's also some former staff in there. Brian Carrington, who I think is the cornerbacks coach at Arizona State, used to coach at Texas. So there's a little bit of emotion that's attached to that game. If Texas makes it through, that's going to make it really fascinating.
Quickly, everybody go check out our great, amazing local sponsor here in Nashville, ML Rose, 6 great locations all across the mid-state area. It is a fantastic place to take the kids, great drink specials, great food. You got craft beer from all over the city and from the area, so they're sort of a curator of that stuff. They're sort of responsible for picking out the best beers in the city. So if you're in town or you live in Nashville, please come by and check out our great and amazing local sponsors, ML Rose. Last one here, and I'll let you go, and I do appreciate it. Make sure you check out all of Sam's great work, of course, at The Athletic. Transfer portal coverage is fantastic. I highly recommend. Great Bill Belichick story as well about his sort of job to taking over at North Carolina. I'm curious how you would articulate. There's a feeling I get, and we get these feelings with teams, players sometimes too, but teams, where I feel like there is some sort of culmination of Texas's growth over the last few years. I know they lost to Georgia twice, and they could absolutely be playing Georgia in the national championship game again. That might actually be my pick right now. But I'm curious how you would articulate what that how do you describe that culmination factor? The building from the day that they hired Sarkisian to joining the SEC to doing what they did last year to getting to where they are today. It feels like they've been building every step of the way. How do you articulate that? What is your perception and perspective on that factor in this game and in the bracket?
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is professional. Is Steve Sarkisian came in 2021 with a vision and has really executed it almost flawlessly. They had a plan of how to turn the roster over, get what they needed done, B, develop their players, coach them up, C, retain those players. From let's not make any bones about it. From an NIL perspective, Texas is as good or better than anybody in the country out there. So everything is done at a professional high level. And of course, Sark has spent time in the NFL. You know, he's with the Falcons as an offense coordinator. So he's got a little bit of that experience. But they're organized from the top, from a staff standpoint. They're disciplined from a team standpoint. And I think there was just I think Sark has tapped into a certain emotion that Texas and the players and the culture and the people there just got tired of being the butt of the joke. And I think he tapped into that. And I'll never forget, he kept saying it. I think it was in year 2, certainly in year 3. He said, you know, everybody likes to hate Texas and everybody likes to badmouth Texas. He goes, we need to start punching back. We need to start delivering the blows instead of just letting all that come to us. And I think that mentality really mattered. And then when you went and saw what they did in Tuscaloosa in 2023, and then you saw what they did in the Big House this year, even though Michigan didn't turn out to be as good as we thought, it still was a statement win for that program. And then to see what they did at the end of the year against A&M in a game that, you know, A&M wanted more than any other. And as loud as that place was, one of the loudest places I've ever been in my career, my 20-year career. And the best way I can describe it is it's professional, and they have not really let us down in that we had all these expectations for them in 2023 to go win the Big 12 and make the playoff. And it was set up because of what we knew of Texas's history to let us down and to not do it. They followed through and they got it done. And then this year, are they going to be a big bad program in the SEC? Guess what? Even though they didn't win the SEC, they got to the title in year 1. They got it done. They have met the expectations and in some cases exceeded them. And it's a testament to everybody in that building to what they've done because it has been a singular focus. They've gotten the riffraff out. It's not a bunch of boosters meddling and all that stuff. Everybody's aligned, and it's running like a well-oiled machine. And to me, if they make a run here, they've got a potential to make this thing go for a while. Maybe not quite mid-2000s. Might be hard to go 9 straight 10-win seasons, but they've got the potential to get something really cooking here.
I'll pander as well. They eliminated from their program everything A&M could not when Jimbo Fisher was there. I'll pander. I'm fine pandering. All right. It sounds like you're buying into the whole, like they're getting to the Oregon game probably.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. I think so. When I look at it from a roster standpoint, now, the one thing that would give me pause, back to your earlier question, is do they play with their food offensively? Are they a mess? Do they turn the ball over? Do they fail to convert in the red zone? That's the only thing, in my opinion, that's top. I think the defense is going to bring it every time they're out there. It's a question of whether or not they can clean up what has been ailing them offensively.
No question. Check out all Sam's great work, man. We do appreciate you. Go check out ML Rose as well. Thank you, man, for giving us some time. We do really appreciate you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.